All right, everybody, punch it in. We've got some breaking Seattle Seahawks news. Well, at this point, it's about a half hour old, but relatively speaking, that's pretty darn breaking, and it's a big one. We finally did it. We made the hire. We made the move. We made the move that was heavily rumored we would be making over a week ago. Klint Kubiak is your new offensive coordinator. Klint Kubiak has been hired as the offensive coordinator. Garofalo was the original source. I think there were a couple others as well. It's being reported by all the big Seahawks beat reporters, so looks like it is officially official. Kubiak has been the favorite for a while, and that ended up panning out. A lot of people were saying, oh, maybe we don't like him anymore. Maybe the second interview went badly, but they just wanted to do due diligence. They just wanted to take a look at Stenovich first. So, Klint Kubiak is your guy ultimately. And you guys know I was pretty big into this one. I like this one a lot. Klint Kubiak hasn't had his big landmark offensive coordinator play calling season yet. Klint Kubiak has not had some overwhelming, undeniable success yet, but if he did have those things, he would probably be a head coach right now. You wouldn't be able to get him. So this was one of my favorite options. Klint Kubiak, of course, of the Kubiak family. Gary Kubiak was a coach in the NFL for a long time, won a Super Bowl, was a very successful offensive coordinator. So Klint Kubiak is your latest Nepo hire, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. And in fact, in this case, I suspect it will be a very good thing. So I already talked about Kubiak pretty extensively when he was getting interviewed, but just to go over the resume that I wrote up again, very young, only 37 years old. Um, Not that that's going to be a very big factor because if he does well for us, then it's very likely he's going to be hired as a head coach in the next year or two. So I doubt he'll be here long, one way or the other. Either he does well and he gets hired as a head coach, or he does poorly and he'll be out of here in a few years. But you take a look at what he's done so far. Most recently, he was the offensive coordinator for the Saints, and I think we all remember how good the Saints offense was those first two games, and then they got swamped with so many injuries that nobody could have overcome all of it. They lost their quarterbacks, they lost their offensive linemen, they lost receivers, they lost everything on that offense. And by the end of the year, they had a bad offense in terms of points per game, about 20 points a game, and a negative 0.057 EPA, which was 25th. So that's also bad. Not terrible, but bad. But you would have been bad too if you were forced to coach guys like Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner. So again, you don't hold that too much against him. You remember the good stuff that he did because it's not like he had overwhelming talent even at the start of the year. He had Derek Carr, an okay quarterback. He had Rashid Shaheed, a great deep threat, but not an elite receiver by any stretch of the imaginations. Guys like Chris Olave keep getting concussed. Guys like Alvin Kamara are getting near the end of the line. And Kubiak, he grinded it out. He did his thing until it became untenable to do so. Spent a year under Shanahan as a passing game coordinator for the 49ers, who had maybe the best passing attack in the league in terms of general efficiency in 2023. Almost a .3 dropback EPA, which is insane. Now, that's obviously mostly Shanahan, but Kubiak is still learning from one of the best. So, no hate there. And he also spent a little bit of time with the Denver Broncos. He did do play calling after they fired, I think his name was Otten, after week 10, and he did make things slightly better for the offense, but not really, right? It was still really bad, but at the end of the day, it was Nathaniel Hackett's show, and Nathaniel Hackett was very ill equipped to handle the situation in Denver. So you look at 2022 as a whole, it's not a very good feather in the cap year for him. But then you have like what he did with the Minnesota Vikings 2021. He was the offensive coordinator, and this was Mike Zimmer, right? So he was calling plays in Minnesota for 1 year, and he did pretty decently. He did okay. He had about an average offense. And the Vikings at this point, they had good players. You know, Kirk Cousins was their quarterback. They had a very young Justin Jefferson. I think they still had Adam Thielen at this point, who was still pretty decent, but it wasn't an overwhelming amount of talent, and he made it go pretty decently. So I look at this and I go, all right, that's at least something I can build my church on. Was a good quarterback coach for 2 years, coaching Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins had two really good seasons statistically. Now, Kirk Cousins has been good before linking up with Kubiak, so it's not like that's credit to him fully, but it's good. Spent 3 years as an offensive assistant in Denver when Denver was going through the lows of the lows after Peyton Manning, and this was also immediately after them having Kubiak as the head coach when they won the Super Bowl in 2015. So three not very good years. Spent a year as a Kansas Jayhawk wide receiver coach, and was also the offensive quality control coach for the Vikings for 2 years, where they were pretty much average offensively. This was before Kirk Cousins, by the way. This was when Kirk Cousins was in Washington. What the Vikings have here, like Christian Ponder or something like that. So hasn't had a lot to work with here overall. When he has had decent things to work with, he's done fairly well. So I like this hire a lot. I think you're also potentially benefiting from having a guy like a Gary Kubiak in the building, even if not physically, then metaphorically, because you know that someone like Klint Kubiak is going to lean on his extremely experienced and extremely successful father for advice and trying to get a feel for how to do this stuff. But you're not going to have to go through that initial experience of having a guy who has never done it before. He's already gone through that. He's already had 2.5 years of play calling in the NFL to learn what does work and what doesn't work. And you give him good personnel, you would expect him to be able to produce good results. And also remember, we were not the only team interested in Kubiak. There were at least one or two other teams that were thinking about hiring him as an OC and giving him play calling. So this isn't a situation where we just like this guy or claim to like this guy and nobody else is even looking at him. And it's just kind of weird to you wonder, well, why do you like him so much? Because you're on an island there. That's not necessarily the case here. So great hire. Very excited about this. The question is, the big question is, how good a job can he do at mitigating a mediocre or worse offensive line? There's a very good chance we have a mediocre or worse or even much worse offensive line in 2025, and the offensive coordinator is going to have to work around that. Kubiak, I'm going to have to do some deep diving into it. My impression is that he does an okay job with that kind of stuff, and it should be workable. It should be better than what we had with Grubb for sure. But overall, I'm really happy with this hire. I think that the offense is going to, in some regards, go back to more what it looked like under Shane Waldron, and I do consider that to be a good thing, by the way. I know a lot of people wouldn't, but to me that would be a big improvement over what we had last year with Grubb, and it would be a step in the right direction. And there is some potential that it ends up going beyond that to where the offense is elite or close to it. Excuse me, close to it. All right, I'm going to get out of here. That is your breaking news for the day. You're not going to see any Seahawks news today that is more significant than that. Klint Kubiak is your new offensive coordinator. I really like it. I'm excited for it. Let's buckle up and let's get behind our guy now, because he'll be here for at least a year, and you would hope at least a little bit more than that. All right, go Hawks. Be on Twitch later tonight. Enjoy the playoff games. Klint Kubiak's your guy.